On the heels of the Family Renewal Project banquet, we invite Damon Owens, a huge Theology of the Body presenter throughout the country, onto the set for a powerful discussion on Spirit and Spire, starting right now.
Broadcasting from the Cathedral of the Assumption in Louisville, Kentucky, this is Spirit and Spire. And now, here is your host.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spirit and Spire. I'm your host today, John Soule, and joined with me is my co-host, Vincent Ricketts.
Howdy.
There he is again, and today we have a very special guest. He spoke at Family Renewal Project's banquet recently, and he is a very good friend in the Theology of the Body world, Damon Owens. Thank you, Damon, for being on the show today.
Thanks for inviting me. This is a nice opportunity to chat with you guys.
Yeah, it's a great gift, and I know that you've had a big background in the Theology of the Body world with the TOB Institute and other organizations. But before we get into all of that and just some of your heart, as well as getting your finger on the pulse of the Archdiocese of Louisville that you've served in the last couple days, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, your own faith journey, and draw people into your own heart.
Yeah, sure, John. First of all, great to be in Louisville.
Yeah.
If I say that right, Louisville?
Yes.
No. Louisville.
Well,
Louisville.
No, you didn't. But it's
okay.
It's debatable.
All right. Well, before I go, you guys are going to have to school me my Louisville.
That's right.
Yeah. It's been, the journey really is the ministry. And I mean that in a real sense. You know, I never got to the theology schools and the ability to study academically before and sort of get turned on. And, you know, I admire guys like that and gals as well. But mine is really a lived experience where I grew up in a, solid Catholic home. Nominal, right? We went to Mass on Sunday. I didn't learn the rosary until I was an adult and learned it myself. But
so solid meaning loosely solid,
meaning that we were there every Sunday.
Yeah.
Right. And that I eventually at some point had my sacraments. Oddly, I wasn't baptized till I was 9. Yeah, I'm having a conversation with my dad now. My mother's passed in 22. My dad's 85, retired deacon.
Wow.
So now I can ask him all the hard questions about like, hey, remember in like 1982 when he was, oh yeah, let me tell you about that. But for some strange reason, which he didn't even fully remember, because he was a convert. My father converted when he was 16. My grandfather was an AME Zion itinerant preacher of all things, right? For years I thought he was a pastor, but he would travel around the country, around Asheville, North Carolina, and he literally had a prayer closet. He could quote you, the book of James, when he was like 90. He died at 102.
Wow.
So faithful family, my dad, but stern, very strict. So my dad had a conversion experience at a church in Asheville, North Carolina. This is back in 1958. When there were still places that, black people couldn't go.
Wow.
But he found himself at this parish in Asheville and encountered the Lord outside of a mass. It was just walking in, and there was this presence of the Lord in the tabernacle that he had never experienced before. That's another great story. My point is that we grew up in a very faithful Christian home where it was freely talking about the Lord, talking about, God is real. I never doubted whether God was real. It was just sort of a natural part of everything. But the Catholic faith became something that we had a major move in the family to South Jersey. And then we started getting more actively involved, in the church. And that's when I was baptized, and with my sister, my younger sister. So that I remember because it was, it started to matter how I spent my time. There was a youth group, there was, retreats, there were sort of the Catholic kids, doing the stuff. But, I was a kid trying to be cool all the time. So I had my football friends, I had my baseball friends, I had my basketball friends, I had, school. I was still in Boy Scouts because, I'm still looking ahead for resume and whatnot. But got my Eagle, right? But anyway, there was this compartmentalized of things. So long story short is the Catholic identity piece was always one of the planets in the constellation of Damon. It was no unity of life. It was just one of those things I did at certain times of the week. And but it was important. And I grew up in a place where it wasn't challenged. So I grew up in a very comfortable way, being Catholic, of playing football, but also being a Boy Scouts. And it was just, a beautiful upbringing. I would say my pivot point was I was preparing for confirmation. And back then, I think it was, I forgot, maybe ninth grade. And the retreat I did not want to go on. It was corny. I was like, I don't want to be with these. I was like, I had better, cooler things to do. Yeah. But you had to go on the retreat in order to prepare for the sacrament. And I was in the back of the room, and I was just hot. I was, my little teenage attitude, imagine a little black kid, big afro, just sit in the back with the arms crossed, toes crossed. And the Lord hit me like the first time you hear a love song. I mean, it was, and I wasn't expecting it. That wasn't our spirituality. That wasn't the vibe of the church. This was a 1970s guitar playing, secular kind of, but just,
felt banners.
We cut felt banners. We had the cotton balls for the sheep. We did this was the parish. This wasn't the parish of renewal encounter with the Lord and falling out in the Spirit, right? So somehow we were playing, somebody was playing like You Got a Friend, Got a friend, I don't know
James Taylor Mass.
It was total, this is very accurate, right? So I'm in the back of the room and I just have this encounter with the Lord, and to this day it's kind of weird putting words to it. But one thing I knew that I didn't know before was that God's real. Like God is real, and he's a person. He knows me. He loves me. But what really got me was he actually likes me. I mean, when you're I don't know how old am I, 13, 14 years old. And this whole thing is like, there's always a God. I never questioned that, like I said. But God loves you because he has to. He's love. He is love. He can love anybody. He loves Hitler. Right. Yeah. So it's like, he loves me. Okay. That doesn't move the needle. Right. But the idea that he sees me, he knows me, and he likes me. Yeah. And I remember having this experience where he was like literally sitting next to me, and he wasn't the happy clappy, sort of, buddy Jesus kind of thing. Yeah. He was just a dude. Exactly. The statue with it wasn't that. Like, I wasn't like projecting onto him. He was just sitting there, and he was my guy. He was my guy. And yet there was an authority, there was a power. And here I'm trying to put words to it, like, I don't know, 48 years later. But it was real enough that I was just weeping. But it was a delight weeping, like, oh my, all this stuff is real. And I remember that day, and I've said this many times, I thought, now that I know you're real, Lord, I'm going to be real. Because I'm an achiever. I'm like, mixed of like choleric, sanguine, so like I know what's right, and then I can get along with people, and I'm the guy that whenever it says, who's going to run this, and I can say, well, Damon, you should run it. It's like one of those things so when I saw something and I knew it, I was like, God, you're real, watch me go, because then you're really going to love me. I went flipped right into this earn love mentality where, man, if you could love me and I didn't do anything, wow, watch when I do stuff, and you're going to be like, oh, that's my boy. That's my boy, So all this earned stuff, I'm going to pay attention at mass. I'm going to pray more. I'm not going to mess with my sisters, as much. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to smoke. I'm not going to have sex till I'm married. I mean, I was making big promises with stuff. And I had a porn encounter a few years earlier, and it wasn't super positive. I didn't have like a, addiction to it.
Is it ever positive?
True. Yeah, it's very true. But I didn't feel like it wasn't like consuming me. It wasn't part of like behavior or anything like that. But it did mess me up in terms of imagination and whatnot. So I mean, I had enough of a distorted sexual image to make promises not to be that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So so I became that teenage white knuckle Catholic. Man. Where I was holding on, and I was like, watch me go. I'm going to be so good, and I'm going to follow the law, and God's going to be like, why can't you be more like Damon? Why? I was projecting all these things onto God about how I was good enough to deserve that kind of attention.
How'd that work out for you?
So I'm stubborn, so it lasted all through high school. So like 5 solid years. Now I'm playing football, girls, beer parties, we're kind of a country growing up, so we had guns and motorbikes and forts, and but it lasted through high school. So I was resisting. I had lots of girls I was falling for. I had a lot of close encounters at some of these parties, but it was always like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I play football. I'm good, and God loves me, and I want to stay good. And So white knuckle fell apart within the first 3 days of college. 3 days of college, it was a classic. I was a meme. I became a meme. Like within 48 hours of being on campus, I had done everything I swore I would never do. It was like the whole spring went, I'm serious. Girls, sex, drinking, all that stuff. So, and it was this jolting thing. It was already jolting when you go to college and you're in the new dorm and your roommate and the new schedule. Class hadn't even started yet. Football practice had been there like a week earlier, right? So everything was new. So I'm just thinking like, okay, I'll get my stuff together soon. I'll get everything back together soon. Never got it back together. It just went worse and worse, more intense. Joined a fraternity, and being my college experience was, I still have friends to this day. These are my boys. But personally, it was such a departure from who I wanted to be, who I knew I really was, but I didn't have anything to hold on to. So it was almost like sliding down this thing and trying to find something to hold on to. Mm-hmm. So it was my senior year in college. I went to Brown up in Providence, Rhode Island. So it's like center located where you can go right up to Boston. You can drive down to New Haven, and that whole eastern corridor is like, there's so many colleges. There's so many like all girls schools, and we just had a map. We were just like traveling all through like so we were bad. We were pretty bad.
Land of opportunity.
It was, especially in that whole.
That way.
It felt that way, except my senior year. So it was late in the senior year, and we're coming back from what should have been described then was an epic sort of weekend party somewhere, and we were driving back, watching the sun come up, like another meme happening, and I remember like, is this as good as it gets? Is this? Because it was everything we were supposed to be, and all the partying and such, but it was such an empty feeling. And it wasn't a despair. Well, maybe it was a little bit of despair, but it wasn't like a final despair. It was more of, wow, where's the good here? And I didn't have any real theology. Didn't have any Catholic training in the sense of beginning and beginning again, or all the things that I know now. So it was just like, wow, it's got to get better. So had that in my heart. Came back after graduation, worked for a big company, AT&T Bell Labs. They sent me out to California for graduate school. They said I can go anywhere I want. I'm like, I'm going to California, right? Took to see what best mechanical engineering schools there were, which ones they'd pay for. It was a sweet deal. This was back when they had money.
Right.
So they'd be like, yeah, go to graduate school and we'll pay you half salary while you're in school full time. Anywhere in the world.
I don't even know if that happens anymore.
I don't think it does. So I was like, hey, I'm going to go to Stanford. Well, I didn't get in. So I was really upset. But you see, Berkeley had like number 2 or number 3 mechanical engineering program in the country. So I was like, yeah, I go to Berkeley.
So you did mechanical engineering?
I did, yeah. So I was looking for a master's in mechanical engineering. And on the third day that I was there, I met the woman who'd be my wife, Melanie. And walked into a party, and this was a completely different experience. And I remember bargaining with God that if you give me just another 2 years, I even like doing the 18 months. Give me 18 months, I'll get my degree, I'll finish all my tomfoolery out in California, and I'll come back and I'll start the adult. It was a complete. This is the choleric. This was the achiever. I had a plan. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get this out of my system, and I'll come back, and I'll adult. Mm-hmm. And I got there, and on the third day, I walked into this party, and it was all the girls I ever thought California was. It was like I started praying again, like, thank you, Lord, for these beautiful women, thank you for the and I walked up, and eventually I met Melanie, and we just clicked. We just the conversation. She has such a beautiful spirit. And I used to joke about it. Like people talk, strangers would walk up to her. They'd have a conversation. Within 10 minutes, they're pouring their whole heart out to her. You ever met people like that? It's
yes.
It's definitely a charism, right? I called it the Melanie effect. I was like, there you go with the Melanie effect again.
You should write a book.
I'm working on it. She hates it when I do that. Right? I'm like, there's a Melanie effect, right? So we walk into parties, and I'm like, hey, what's up? And she's in the corner, literally with somebody, and they're just like, it's like, so I felt like I was like that with her, and I just loved being around her. I loved talking to her, and
There's something about the feminine heart that does that.
Yeah, that's open, like that vulnerable feminine heart. I feel like it opens up in any man this desire, this power to protect, to man up, right?
Well, it's funny you shared your early days of just the compartmentalization and how that even affected you in college and all of that. Like, you were painting a picture of my life. Like, I kept a journal myself, and I wrote categories like baseball, piano, Boy Scouts, my girlfriend, church. That was a category, and I would like have a title and type about this is what happened in this category and move on. And there was no unity. It was just, that's amazing. So there's a lot of
I can resonate with that.
Yeah.
Because you want an excellence, you want something, you want things need to mean and matter, and you didn't want to like focus on one thing and realize you left a whole category of other things untouched, and you realize, oh, that was actually more important.
Right. Without learning integration, I didn't know any of that. I didn't even know that term.
Exactly.
So you said you're like going way back to your confirmation. You're like, God, you're real. I'm going to be real.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting word choice. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, because you said I'm going to be real, and then the immediate next thing was the white knuckle Catholic.
Prove yourself.
Yep.
Proving yourself. Yeah.
So, how is that real?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I think I find myself, as you're asking that, I'm thinking of myself more as a dad now than as the boy back then. I think I carried, if we're going to get into the experience and woundings, I think I carried with myself this burden to be the fixer. I'm extremely capable. I'm extremely gifted. And I've had when I touch things go really well. And I think in those early days, I took that as therefore it's my responsibility. My father was a recovering alcoholic. There were things out of my control as the middle boy in the house. And I'm not trying to get too deep on you, but I think that all hit me in the sense of the real is just be you. Just be Damon. And it's good, not even good enough, it's awesome. And that's a pace of peace that I didn't have then. So I had to be the achiever. I had to go and do all these things in order then to be worthy of, the accolades, to be worthy of the friendship and love, ultimately, right? So the real to me, I think at that moment meant I don't have to do all these things. And yet I didn't know anything else. It was like habituated. So then I was like, well, you could, if you stepped it up 10%, you might get some really good results. And you did it for everybody else, maybe do it for God. And I think it was one of those like synapse things that just happened so quickly. That my response to it was.
So I'm going to be real was genuine.
Oh yeah.
But it was hijacked instantly.
Instantly, because I had no behavior. It's thought, act, repeated act, habit, virtue. Right. So if I had the thought, I had the intention, but my first act was like, I don't know how to write with my left hand. Let me just do what I usually do, and I can go ahead and go back to the familiar. That's just me just right now processing, as a dad, as I see some of these things developing in my own kids, that, it's okay, just relax, just do your thing, right? And yet oddly, at the same time, I find it annoying in my kids. Something wells up me like annoyed, like you seriously could have washed that extra cup. You put the soap on the sponge and you washed your cup and you left your sister's cup on the counter. Like, what, just you know what I mean? Because part of me is like, you could have been the hero. You could have been the. So there's still this tension in me from this boy. But I think the real was most definitely authentic. But there was nothing there in terms of how do I do it. So the falling back was more of, well, I got to do something. Let me do what I'm good at.
Well, it's funny, like the theme of our banquet being fully alive.
Yeah.
Right? That whole idea of like when you said real, I thought fully alive. You wanted to be who God is in that way, in some way, not like to be like God, like the serpent tempted you, because we already were like God, right? But there was that desire to be more yourself, more your true self, and you just didn't know how to do it.
Yeah, that's a good, John, because I think the way I probably processed it in my mind was, wow, if I'm this good enough to receive this kind of attention from the one true God, then wow, certain percentage of me says, well, just be there. The other part was like, but you could be more, like, but you could be. But the part of me was like, wow, what if I could just be that? Is it that easy? Is it that simple? I mean, I'm an American. Like, you earn stuff, right? You don't just get stuff because you showed up. You gotta be worthy of that. And that's this voice. And the other voice was like, yeah, but he's here now in this moment when you haven't earned it, when you didn't do anything. So maybe that actually is good enough. No, it can't be good enough, And then again, synapses. It's not like it's as well thought out. 13, 14.
When the prodigal son shows up, the father says you have to do 6 months hard labor, right? And then we'll be fine.
And then we'll get you your ring.
Vincent, to this day, that parable wrecks my heart.
Me too.
Wrecks my heart.
Yeah.
And I was on retreat, I don't know how many years ago, and a priest had said, what do you think it was like at the breakfast table the next day after the banquet? And I've never gotten that out of my heart, right?
Wow.
This abundant prodigal father, right, who gave this massive, now he got the son who's back, who probably still smells, even after he smells like the pigsty. Then you got the older brother who's still livid. I didn't even get a kid. I didn't even get a calf. My boys, I didn't get, and they're all sitting at the breakfast table the next morning. Because to me, the processing is the same thing as you just asked me. It would be, man, I have not earned this, Dad. I don't deserve all this. I got this ring. I got this robe. I just want to tell you again how sorry I am. And Dad's like, you're back.
Yeah.
So I'm processing that question, that meditative question, through that same thing. Like, yeah, the unworthiness wrecks you.
And then to stay back. Right, because how easy is it to? Right, of course, it's always that desire to okay, you've entered the promised land. How do you stay there? Right, like how do you remain in Him as He invites us and calls us to do that?
Yeah.
Right. So my question is, when did theology of the body come into your life? Like, I mean, it takes a while to allow that to be integrated to really capture your heart in a way where you can speak it as eloquently as you do. Like there's this moment in time where it's the initial encounter, but there's still the synapses, the old life, the old language. You don't know how to speak it. You don't know how to share it.
Yeah.
It hasn't transformed you. Like, what was that journey?
Yeah. There were a few miracles that happened along the way that still resonate with me. I wasn't insensitive to them. One of them was, so when Melanie and I had met, and again, the cheat code here is all of these experiences ended up being, like the Wizard of Oz. It ended up being the actual story, as opposed to let's get to meet the Oz, the Wiz, and the Wizard, and he'll give us everything. Turns out the journey itself was the absolute. So that's just the cheat code of what's happening here. So all of that deformed, all of that performative love, all that mentality. I meet this woman, I'm head over heels in love with her, and I don't know how to love her. I'm still a man-child. I'm just a boy, but I'm impressive and I'm talk and I could, keep everybody entertained and everybody loves being around Damon. But inside I'm like, you got to keep this wheel going because, got to get everything going so that everything stays right. I'm responsible for everybody's. It was exhausting. I'm with this woman and I just feel like I can be me. She's looking in my eyes. She's like reading my soul and she likes me. I mean, she really likes me. So we're sexually active. I need to put that out there because that was another sort of big turning point for us. We're falling deeply in love. And she's a Catholic background. She grew up Catholic. I grew up Catholic. So she was literally my first Catholic girlfriend. After all these years at 20 some odd. So then I was like, okay, good. Let me amp up the Catholic category.
Yeah.
We'll go to Mass. I remember some of the prayers because she was going to Mass regularly, even in her brokenness. But then I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'll get back to that when I get back to New Jersey. So that experience brought us to a crisis. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but we came to the miraculous decision that we needed to stop having sex. And I was angry about it. I was not leading this. I was realizing this is where the cards are. This is where we are. How are we going to do this? This is going to be disastrous. It's going to end our relationship, but, fine. This is where we're going to go. Let the cards drop, that kind of like defeatist little boy, like, fine, I'll eat my vegetables, and the miracles were that God brought us to this parish in Oakland, California, to this really heterodox, wild priest. My man he was about mid-40s, white hair, Polish dude, 3 earrings of this year, 2 rings of this year. He had a ponytail, and he'd come into mass with these big multicolored dashiki alb, trying to be, to a bunch of people that 40% of them were Baptist converts.
Oh boy! Oh gosh!
Am I getting you a picture? Like, what's going on? We have a 30-member gospel choir.
No way.
The sign of peace was 8 to 10 minutes.
What?
Mass was 2.5 hours.
What?
I'm not exaggerating. So coming from an
Everyone
Irish,
was fine with that.
fine. People flocked to this church. The place was packed every Sunday. And I'm coming from, a New Jersey Irish Catholic 47-minute mass when Father talked too long.
There's a lot of masses here, and if you have a choir, oh my gosh, you better keep it to one song.
We're not going to do all 3 verses. We're just going to do. I'm like, no, the 3rd verse is the one that hits. So this was a big shock. So we started going back to we met this priest. And he was who we needed. He was who we needed because he was right there at that bubble of the church, just outside the bubble. But he was one that we needed to bring us into the fold. He didn't know he was doing it. He didn't know. It's over the years, Melanie has said, you have ascribed more things to him than actually happened, David. But these things were happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm associating it with being more engaged in the church, with getting to know him. I said for years that going to confession with him was the first night I'd gone in a long time. I was like, he didn't do confession. There were boxes in the confessional. We didn't even have a confessional at that one. But at the time I did go back to confession. So whether it was him or someone else, all this swirl of change was happening that involved God, my Catholic faith, this beautiful woman, falling in love, maturing as a young man. All this stuff was swirling, and as a mid-20 young adult, getting a master's degree, getting mad money at a big corporation, getting respect on the workplace. I mean, all this stuff was happening, and we had to make a real choice about our relationship. So I'll fast forward a little bit because there's a lot of weeds here. Sure. The work for us to begin a new chaste relationship, we did it together. Mm. And after these 3 decades in ministry, we were more and more realizing what a miracle that was. More times than not, the decision to be chaste will end your relationship, rightly so.
Yes.
Maybe you come back together later, but to do that journey together is not advised, and it's usually not wise, and it usually doesn't work. For some reason, we went through this journey together with all the temptation, with all the memory of having sexual intimacy, of all the passionate love in the moment. And we walked this journey together, and we failed. And then meeting Father Paul, within 3 weeks of that, the other attempt, it stuck. A month went by, no sexual intimacy. 2 months, 6 months, a year. And time wasn't flying by. This was painful. Mm-hmm. This was like day to day, like AA, one day at a time, new thoughts, new acts, new virtues, and then realizing, oh my gosh, I'm more in love with her. We had to make decisions. Like, we started taking tennis lessons together just to get the energy somewhere. We were doing Weight Watchers. We joined Weight Watchers. I mean, we were by far the youngest people. This is the Weight Watchers in the 80s. So it's awesome. We were doing, what else did we do? We took walks around the Lake Merritt in Oakland, and we knew we had to change. We set our own boundaries about being in each other's apartments at certain times at night, and
you had to channel your energy somewhere.
Yeah,
in a way that was healthy.
Yeah, we weren't fool enough to repress. We were never about repression, right? But there was a reordering, and there was also recognition of just how we knew how weak we were. We had failed so many times. We were like, let's not. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go now. I love you. So that's what I mean. This is rare. We rarely talk about that in young adult work because it's not helpful to most people. Sure. But for our journey, we did this together and started gaining more respect for each other. We started gaining more respect for our faith, and the reasons that we did things were not repressive, and it wasn't white knuckle. That's what was new. I didn't go back to a white knuckle performative, like we have to stop this and then everything will be good. It was like, no, we got to work through this. That's so TOB. Never heard of the phrase. But the experience, the encounter.
But it was coming.
It was coming, right? So the ground is being laid. And we recognized everything we were doing. We talked about this. We were doing it for our love for each other. I mean, who even talks like that?
Right.
This is for us. We weren't engaged. We weren't planning any kind of marriage. This was just the immediate experience of this. So I finished early, my graduate work miraculously again, and come back to New Jersey. She has another 6 months, most painful time of my life. This is 1990. The cell phones weren't out yet. That was actually my work at Bell Labs, developing cellular technology. And internet, I got internet because AT&T and Berkeley were early adopters of Unix and internet. So they had like this funnel, and the email address were like, I think they were like 50 some odd characters, but they worked. Right. So we found ways to like email each other like in this early days with stuff. But otherwise it was the long corded phone, me hiding in the laundry room in New Jersey, telling this woman how much I love her and I miss her. And, so it was a longing there. She came back. The following year, we were engaged. I asked her to marry me, Valentine's Day, 1992, and we were married April 93, on fire. I mean, in that time, we were both looking. It was a chaste love, passionate, and we attributed it to our faith. So now we're young adults on fire with a faith that's challenging us in a way that's never been before, and it's helping us to experience a love we never experienced before. Man, that's potent. That's potent.
It's almost like the challenge is what helped you begin integrating without understanding.
Exactly.
That's what was happening.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, John. The integration was not forced. It was like that was the path that, as hard as it was, we knew we had to keep climbing. It's like, Frodo and Sam going up the mountain.
Yes.
It's like somehow that steep mountain is keeping them away from Mordor, but they're going toward Mordor, So, Lord of the Rings stuff. Sorry, I don't want to jump that.
It's all right. We're going to have a men's retreat on Lord of the Rings in a couple months, so it's good stuff.
So we're married, immediately introduced to natural family planning. This is another pivot moment, a miracle moment. And in our engaged encounter weekend, this couple came and explained, we never heard the phrase natural family planning before ever. And they were like, NFP this, NFP this. And I was like, Melanie, what are they talking about? She was like, I have no idea. But they were cool. They were like a cool couple. And I was like, well, we should find out more. I'm like, yeah, sure. So they had the little sign-up sheet at the end after the presentation, and we go there, and nobody else has signed everything. And I was like, bet, we'll be first. And I was like, no. Nobody else touched it. 30-some-odd couples on this retreat weekend, So we were introduced to NFP. It became part of our marriage prep. I loved NFP. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, charts? Sex, fertility. I was like, yeah, let's go. I want to learn this. Let's go. I was all in at like meeting one, driving back after him. I was like, I think I can create an Excel sheet that might even be predictive of. I was that guy. We've met many of them since then, right? And years of teaching it. But so NFP became this tool for us to look at our sexual desire, our fertility, and the realities of being married, and we invited into teacher training. So we became teachers, NFP teachers in that first year of marriage. We joined 2 different pre-Cana teams. Had no theology. It was all like, I was telling my peers, like, guys, stop having sex. It's going to be the greatest thing in your relationship. You guys are going to, And people were on fire. We were so on fire. We were catching people on fire. And I had no idea what I was talking about. It was awesome. It was awesome. There was no pressure. There was no theology stuff. It was just like, you guys are all whacked. You got to get it back. And the couples loved us. It was like a great rapport.
Raw witness.
It was raw.
Yeah.
You've seen that before. Where it's like your fire just catches other people on fire, right? And so the gifting also was that it put us in regular contact. Talk about community and family renewal project. And the renewal for us was being around a whole set of other couples who were at or above where we wanted to go.
Yeah, and it's like NFP is that foundational environment by which you would even hear a theology of the body.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So we were watching these families we were invited to houses and sloppy spaghetti dinners with little kids around, and we're the young couple without any kids, just recently married, and we're like, look at the chaos. Now, Melanie's one of 8. I had 2 sisters, 3 of us, but we would see these chaos in these families, and it was like this ordered, beautiful mess. And we're like, okay, can't wait till we have our kids. So it was like an education going on just being around them. This is all preparatory. This isn't the theology class yet that I thought I needed, that I thought I wanted, and yet it was that experience there. So fast forward, in 95 was the whole papal mass and chance to sing for St. John Paul II.
Yeah, singing for the Pope. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was
itself.
that was a moment. That was a moment, and it wasn't even. It was a phone call. Like, hey, could you? I was like, yeah. Yeah. I wasn't even a devotee of his at that point. He was just the Pope. He was the only Pope I knew.
Yeah, right.
78 to 2005, and this is 95. So I thought there was only one Pope ever. It was just, Pope's always John Paul II. I didn't know anything.
This is who he is.
This is who he is. He's just the Pope. But we started learning and living with new couples, teaching NFP, being involved in these early relationships and just connecting with couples. And it started to sauce our marriage, that we're used to being around, and had our first daughter in 96, Naomi. Leah was born in 97, and we're still practicing NFP, love it. Rachel was born in 99. And this time I'm still working full time, but we're doing pre-Canas every weekend, sometimes 2 and 3. This is northern New Jersey in the 90s. There's been a huge decline in marriages. I talk about that, 31% decline since 2000. But in the 90s, there were hundreds of opportunities. There were couples and weekends all the time. And we were the only ones that were on fire to talk about sexuality. The sex talk at pre-Cana was like the cup nobody wanted to do. And we were like, hey, we'll do it. We'll do it. And that word got around North Jersey, New York, and the area there. So we were getting calls like, hey, would you mind? Well, yep, we'll be there. Yep, we'll be there. So God was giving us opportunities, and me in particular, of presenting, of being in front of crowds of people on a very difficult topic, and giving a joyful witness to what the hard thing can do for you. So that's how I frame it. That was how we cut our teeth. I'd walk into Dunwoody Seminary in Archdiocese of New York, and there could be 125, 140 couples preparing for marriage. And we're coming in talking about chastity, contraception, and NFP.
Wow.
Cold. And I used to love those weekends. I'd come in and be not belligerent, but just guys, you're going to love this. You're going to be really mad at me, but then you're going to thank me. Setting it up. So it gets this performative art of coming in and teaching the faith to people who don't want to be taught the faith.
That's what we learn in the classroom with students.
I saw that when I watched you, Vincent, there. So there's and it's not always direct. Sometimes you get the kids that go after you, but that's the apathy. It's the hey, can I get the broken candy? Hey, can I get the and then the goofballs, and you're like, guys, this is gonna change your life. You gotta pay attention. Right. That tension in your heart about presenting in places that people aren't like, please teach us. We'll take notes about. That's easy.
Yeah.
It's the rapport, the trust, the influence, the impact, right? And walking people in those groups through that. And we experienced that. And I'm still doing this as a weekend gig. AT&T goes through its decline. Bell Labs split off. Lucent Technologies. There was a whole internal thing, and I'd been there at about 14 years by that time, and ended up starting my own engineering firm with about 8 other managers and about 80 engineers. We took 35 Bell Labs patents, and we formed this pitch back to the company. And as crazy as it sounds, they accepted the pitch. So we found ourselves in 2001, July, about 2 months before 9/11, with a company valued at $1.3 billion.
Whoa.
That was the valuation. Wow. Venture capitalists. We had 3-year guarantee contracts worth about a little over $1 billion, B. And we were rolling. And we were like, okay, IPO in 2 years. We're going to do this. We're going to we had the plan. And it was exciting. This was the big shot because that was the big era of all the new tech stuff. And we're in the middle of it. And we had very unique product, very unique positioning. We were it was too good to be true because it was. We were literally sold in 12 months. June 1st, 2001 was our official launch date. By June 1st, 2002, this company out of Chicago bought us for some ridiculous amount of money. But we didn't know we were for sale. This is the whole VC world of,
So it got sold out from under you, kind of feeling.
Yeah, I mean, there was like 2 guys in the C-suite but all of a sudden, you get out of meetings and meetings are happening you don't know are happening and whispers and you're like, wait a minute, I'm the director of this. I should be in this meeting. We're the founders. What's going on? So I don't want to go too much detail on that.
Sure.
Point is, this is the way God wrested me out of corporate because I was so angry. I was so hurt. I mean, I got a boatload of money, but it was like, I was mad. Like, this was my project. This was supposed to happen. It was all that betrayal, all that kind of thing happened. So I left. And quick, real funny story. They were suing me. They were going to sue me because I was part of the deal to go to Chicago and move everything. And I was like, sue me. I mean, I was so mad. I was angry. And the captain, I said, you know what? I don't need you guys. I'm leaving corporate anyway. I'm going to start my own ministry. And I was just bluffing. I was like puffing. Well, by the time the rumor got back to the VCs and everything else, they thought, oh, Damon's going to be a pastor of a church. So they came back and they were like, technically we have every right to sue, be part of this, but since you're starting your own church, we're gonna let that go. Just take the check. Just kind of
starting your own church.
I never said that. Everybody knows me knows I'm Catholic, so I was like, I'm not gonna make myself a priest. So it was another, but that would have been a whole legal thing. Dude. So July 2002, no work, no job. Exhausted, angry, sick. I had like all these health issues.
And you still haven't heard of Theology of the Body?
Never heard the word.
What?
Never
this
heard the word.
Crazy.
I joke. I slept the month of July 2002. I slept the whole month.
Wow.
Now I had at that point I had 4 kids, pregnant with our 5th. I mean, it was like the family was there, but I was so wrapped up in this new company. And I didn't realize until everything came to a screeching halt. So I was like, you know what? Let's go on a vacation. We haven't been on vacation before as a family. And we went on the first Catholic Answers cruise. Now, if you're familiar with Catholic Answers, like Jimmy Aiken and Carl Keating, and, these are my heroes. I'm reading the rock magazine, and they was like, we're going to start a cruise. We're going to have a cruise, and we're going to invite people. And it was hugely expensive. But I was like, Mel, we should go. Let's just hang out for a week. And that was the first time sitting down smoking cigars with Jimmy Aiken and talking to these guys. And they were like, you should come out to San Diego. And because they knew about the work I was doing. And by this time, I had really gotten Humanae Vitae deeply embedded in everything I did. I should have mentioned that before. So we started transitioning to a lot more teaching, probably 6 years earlier. And I'm studying that 40 paragraph.
So you heard of Humanae Vitae, but still not Theology of the Body.
Because what happened was, even with the witness talks, people would ask tough questions, and I didn't know. And someone had introduced me to Humanae Vitae, Father Richard Hogan, God rest his soul, and that was my study. I mean, my study copy was just all through it. So and that was very, very objective, very deductive. The logic was there, but it made sense, and I could teach from it. So I discovered a teaching charism. I discovered Humanae Vitae, and that the church's teachings actually had really compelling answers. So this is all happening on this cruise, and I'm thinking maybe I should go into full-time ministry. And they invited me out later on, and sat with them. It didn't work out, and we were almost there, but it was enough to get me thinking about starting my own ministry, like I would start a company. So I've done that before. Right. So let's make this for the church. So that began. Melanie was really the catalyst there. I had another identity, performative problem. Like, here I did all this stuff in engineering. I've got these degrees. I made this money. I have this company. I did all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, what am I do next? And she's like, you should speak. I'm like, that's a side gig, babe. That's not the man stuff. You're not gonna just go around and give talks. Like, what am I calling myself, a speaker? I mean, like, I used to mock it. I'd be like, not a speaker. It's like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. I'm an engineer. I think I had hard stuff. What do you know? I'm a speaker. She's like, no, I really think you should do it full time. So for kicks and giggles, I put a quick little business plan, like how could we support the family? Because I didn't want to burn through all the, the money there. And I was like, we can give this 2 years. And without any marketing, these talk requests started just coming out of nowhere. I kid you not. I didn't even know how to market. I didn't know anything about the church. I didn't know anything about and just the requests started coming. And then I just had to go through that awkward phase of like, okay, well, that's going to be, $500. that my request is, $600. I felt so like icky asking for
money from people in the church.
Oh my gosh! Like to give stuff that I love to do, that I knew was the gift, and was teaching in ways that it was. Oh, Father will teach that. No, has he? No. It's the rare priest that has that gifting, right? And I had the gift. I didn't respect it. I didn't recognize it, but the response was there. So I'm wrestling through all this identity stuff and all this worthiness stuff, and at the same time trying to build a business and value. Trying to put some kind of value on it. And that's when I met, I was building New Jersey Natural Family Planning Association. NJNFP was my first business venture. And I was like, you know what? What NFP needs is like the Soft Drink Bottlers Association, right? Where you can get Pepsi, Coca-Cola, RC. You can get all these giants in together, and they can go to D.C. on K Street, and they can lobby for soft drink together and still be competitive businesses. I said the problem with NFP is you got your Billings and you got your CCL and you got your Creightons and Marquette. You got all these great guys, and they're all like fighting each other, and nobody's raising the tide. I was like, that's where I'm going to come in. I'm going to come in and I'm going to raise a tide. So you're going to see NFP billboards. You're going to see, the whole soft drink bottle association about the industry, so that you all can thrive. So I went on this whole national tour, and I was meeting with all these heads of guys, and I was pitching this stuff. Man, I was like walking through molasses. It's just not how people think. That's a whole nother talk. Like the NFP world, the pro-life, movement, all these things are so siloed. There's so much competition. It's like nobody's thinking innovative. Nobody's thinking creatively. They're all struggling for the scraps from Longshank's table, Anyway. So that was my learning. There was no real business there on the NFP side because they don't want it to have any kind of business on the NFP side. And that's not even dealing with the public who's still trying to figure out, why should I care about NFP?
Right.
That's the real work.
Why do you think that is? That everything is so siloed? Because John and I have seen that in a number of different areas. Yeah. Why is that?
I think it's because, well, first of all, it's sin. And the question is, what more proximate is the issue, right? The proximate issue is these are all countercultural movements. And if you go back to even like the 50s, the 60s, when these organizations started, I'm speaking specifically the Respect Life groups and the NFP groups, everybody's the enemy. And in order to succeed, you have to have that temperament. You have to be the command and control. You've got to change the narrative. You've got to be the one that's fighting. And you're not expecting anybody to be. And you're the leader.
You're not expecting anyone to help you, so you get used to no one helping you.
That's right.
That when someone does help you, you're suspicious.
Or you hire them.
Yeah.
Right. So you're building the silo by getting the support around you, and you're not expecting that sort of tide. There's no tide. I'm building a lighthouse. The tide is what I do. So then the lighthouse gets built here in Cincinnati. This one gets built in Omaha. This one gets built in, wherever.
Well, you're even speaking into the heart of Louisville, because there's been so much of that unintentionally. I mean, it's survival. We're all trying to maintain an authentic culture of Catholicism when so much abuse or neglect or lack of teaching and betrayal and fear, all of that's crippled us, right?
That's the American story. So
it is.
You're seeing it locally, which I've seen it in New Jersey. I've seen it and then we even get to the sex scandal, which was happening at that 2002 Boston was the whole. So here I'm teaching NFP, trying to promote sexual teaching,
right in the middle of that.
Right at Boston, the whole Boston thing blew up in 2002.
No wonder you slept in July of 2002.
I did, but I was entering into that world, as a noob. I didn't know. I didn't have any of that history of the institutional church. I was still like corporate. Like I can, money, effort, and charisma is going to fix everything. You just got to have the right strategy. You got to, right? It's the whole corporate American mentality.
Well,
that's
honestly,
and that goes back to the earning thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Performative, right?
And yet, strangely, a grace from God, because you didn't have any of that baggage from the institutional church, so it didn't cake your action.
Yeah, I didn't have to unlearn.
Yeah.
So that's a great point, John, because this is right at the point where I was introduced to Theology of the Body. And it took me a while to thank God that I didn't take those philosophy courses at Brown. I didn't take those philosophy courses when I had a mild interest, even though I made fun of them. Like, you guys are never going to get a job. Like, I'm an engineer. I'm going to get a job. I got job offers in my junior year. What are you going to do with a philosophy degree, right? But God saved me from that because I didn't have to unlearn all of that false secular philosophy when I was introduced to the philosophy that allowed me to understand the theology of the body. So 2003, NGNFP is not working. So I need to pivot. And I'm thinking, all right, there's tons of money in marriage prep. It's like fish in a barrel, right? You got to go to marriage prep to get married. So let me find something that worked. I'm a business mind. I know it's very, it's true. Like, nobody's going to pay for it.
Good job security.
Good job. And I see how bad many of these marriage prep programs are. So I'm like, there's a huge opportunity. So I started writing a marriage prep program, as if I was qualified. But I wrote one because I was passionate about it. I was authentic about it. I knew it worked. And I was learning some of the other things that had happened. Well, I was having my opening event. It was a big splash event. And I needed a speaker because, I'm nobody. And there were no real national speakers at the time. There was, you count on one hand. It wasn't like it is now where there's like this whole group of people you can call and to give talk. No, it was priests. It was academics. It was authors. It was not lay people traveling around giving talks. It didn't exist. Mm-hmm. Matthew Kelly was kind of a memory, not really known on the East Coast, but he was big, right? Mary Beth Bonacci was big in the chastity space. There was
Jeff Cavins occasionally, maybe.
I think he was just coming, but he was still local. He was still more Minneapolis, Midwest kind of thing. But ironically or providentially, Ascension Press was the catalyst for both of that. So Jeff Cavins combining with Ascension in 2003, 2004, Christopher West connecting with Matt Pinto and Ascension Press at that same time. So Matt Pinto plays pivotal in all these things and in the changing mentality of getting qualified good lay speakers into church events because the church wasn't ready for that, all through Ascension Press, in my opinion. So I was looking around and people were like, oh, you should call Christopher West to come in and give your talk at your... I'm like, who's Christopher West? Like, oh, he's great. He's from Denver. He's like a really great teacher. And he's got this cassette series that's really just blowing. I was like, fine. I was like, I know who he was, but if you know who he is, I'll get him. So I call the office and this is the joke we have with each other now. We're like good friends now. But back in the day, it was like, I'll call up and his secretary or assistant answered, Janine. And I was like, yeah, it's I think it was like June or July, and I had on the books for an August, September event in that year. And I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about having an event next month at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. And I was wondering, what it would take to get Christopher to come out and speak. And she says, okay, what year? And I was like, this year. She's like, oh, Christopher's booked for the next year and a half. And I laughed. I was like, come on. She's like, no, I'm serious. He's flat out booked for the next 18 months. So then I'm like, what the heck am I doing wrong? Like, I didn't even know there was a market. And then who is this dude that's getting these talks? So I was like, all right. And I thought about it. And then being, unusually exceptional in my own mind, I called her back. And I said, listen, this day's going to happen. This is the only day I get this giant hall at Seton. I says, what is he doing? What does the schedule look like in New Jersey for that week? And she said, well, actually, he's speaking in Bergen County, North Jersey on that Saturday. And I said, okay, well, I'm talking Friday night. How about he comes up Friday night? And she went, oh, let me ask him. The calendar opened up because I had asked for the Saturday.
Dude.
So again, I don't know him, but now I'm fascinated. Like, I got questions for you, bro. He comes, knocks it out of the park. I mean, this is early Christopher West. Like, he's raw, and he's rocking people. We had 500 people show up with 3 weeks of advertising at a college auditorium, not associated with a parish, with flyers. I mean, literally hand-printed
That's right,
flyers.
Social media wasn't a thing.
No, I am on Microsoft Word creating these flyers I'm kidding you, this was old school, man. Dude. 500 people. Wow. I was shocked. I didn't know people that cared about it. And he knocked it out. People were, from that event, I've counted so far 9 ministries that were started that night that are still in operation in the New Jersey area. And there may be more, but those are 9 that I know from that night.
And this was 03, 04?
This was 2003.
Wow. So that's when you heard of Theology of the Body.
Then I was like, because what happened was somebody had given me the tape in between the booking and the event, had given me one of Christopher's tapes. I think it was Naked Without Shame was the whole thing. They had given me one of the tapes. It was intro to, it was some kind of provocative title. And I popped it in my car because we had tape players back then. And I put the cassette tape in. This man in 42 minutes, that's how long one side of a tape is, 42 minutes did what I knew, and I was doing my thing then with Humanae Vitae. It would have taken me 2 days. I mean, it would have 2 sessions to get through. Because, you're a presenter. Like when you know how you're going to bring an audience, the rapport, the trust, the influence, and then the impact. Like there's an arc to it. This is performative art. And you got to get people, you got to keep them, you see where they are, meet them where they are, answer felt needs, get them interested to learn more. It's a dance, like to really impact. You're not just throwing information at people, right? And I listened to him, and he moved from like point A to A2 to A, and I'm like, that would have taken me 45 minutes to do. And he had a new vocabulary and a language, and I'm like, whatever this theology body is, I'm in. So that night he came, he stayed at my house that Friday night. And I had a movie theater down in the basement, a nice one. I like that house. And we were watching, it was Gladiator. That just came out on like DVD. Yeah. I mean, we go way back, man. So I was like, hey, do you like Gladiator? He was like, oh, I love that movie. So we popped Gladiator, and this is like midnight because the event went to like 10 or whatever, rough in place. And then for some reason we started talking, which dudes never do during a movie, especially Gladiator, right? And we ended up stopping this and having the most formative conversation about theology of the body, about the Catholic Church, about lay speakers, about the whole industry. And he was just like, if you ever meet Christopher, he's not a detail guy. he's a visionary. Yeah. He's not the guy who's going to be like, he's like, I'm spitballing here. You got to meet Matt Pinto. Matt Pinto was the president of Ascension Press. He's that guy. So he's like, Matt's taking care of all the business side here, but I'm, kind of. But I said, man, I got to learn this theology of the body. He was like, yeah, you should, man. You should. I went to college. I did this. I did graduate school. Graduate. I was like, yeah, I'm going to study that. I'm going to get that down, and then I'm going to add this to the repertoire. I'm going to, integrate the theology of the body. So I ended up reaching out. He introduced me to Matt, and then Matt and I became like best friends. And he appreciated my business perspective, as corporate, entrepreneurial, but also the passion, the teaching. And things started happening really quickly. Mm-hmm. Ascension is growing. The Great Adventure with Jeff Cavins is one wing. The other wing is Christopher West in Theology of the Body. They just had The Passion of the Christ came out, or it was whatever the timing was, and Matt had created this little pamphlet called The Guide to the Passion of the Christ. And I think it sold like 200,000 copies in the Catholic space. Yeah. It was berserk, bonkers. So Matt was already like his pulse on where it was, kind of moving and needed. And Matt really just took me under his wing. Because in really sense, I was nobody in that space. But he recognized something, and I started getting all of these talk requests. Christopher was booked 1.5 years out. So then they trusted me to start taking some of his booking stuff, which I look back now, I was like, that was insane. Mm-hmm. But the demand was like exploding for this theology of the body. So I was got my nose in the book, and I was trying to learn this thing, and I could not figure it out. I had the most difficult time learning theology of the body. I couldn't get it. I'm reading English. I'm a smart guy. I'm good with engineer, but I'm reading this, and I'm like, you ever read something and you're getting it, but then you're like, I think there's something else here that I'm just not getting. Mm-hmm. But you keep going, and you kind of like, there's something I'm not getting. That was my whole sense from probably 2003 to 2005, 2006.
It was a new language.
It was a new language, but it was also, there was underlying philosophies that he was blending, synthesizing, that I didn't even know they existed, much less what was. So some things were in, some things were out. There was the phrases, and I'm accepting everything because it makes sense. but I don't have any kind of skill to critique. I don't have any kind of ability to realize the impact of leaving this part out and including this or emphasize. I'm just accepting it as it is. Yeah. So here's the other miracle that happens at that time. I'm introduced to Opus Dei. If you're familiar with Opus Dei, St. Josemaria Escrivá, and it was a spirituality that hit me. I went on a retreat, and it was just what I needed. It's just his writing, his spirituality. You know, he doesn't like that, but I mean, the way he approached the church and things like that, and this particular priest, I just fell in love with him. He spoke how I needed, where I needed. He's crusty. He was acerbic. He was just sarcastic and brilliant. And going to confession to him is like, Seven Sorrows of Mary. It's like, you walk in and he's like, give me the good stuff. Give me the bad stuff. What's the word? Come on, start with the bad stuff. Go. That kind of, and I'm like, okay, and he's like, yeah. It's because you suck, right? You suck. And like, yeah, no, you don't. That's the gospel. That kind of like in your heart, manly. Turns out he's got, advanced degrees in philosophy. So I said one time, either in spiritual direction or in confession, I was like, hey, Father Bob, I'm trying to read this Theology of the Body. And he bursts out laughing. He was like, doesn't make any sense to you, does it? You're not getting it, are you? Yeah, because you're an engineer. You're an engineer. You're not going to get this. You're an engineer. Good luck with that, Damon. I mean, just pummeling, like a big. And I was like, what am I missing? And he was like, maybe some background in philosophy, or maybe some. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I said, because I got to talk on Saturday. I'm the kind of guy that learns something that gets this much and can make a great talk on it because it matters to me, and I can see that it's enough. I don't need to teach you everything, but so I was fine doing that, and then I actually learn. I'm more of an external processor, so I learn based on the teaching and based on the response. So he's got him. He became my spiritual director, confessor. He was my professor for the next 4 years. I literally have old yellow Wendy's napkins where we would meet. I would meet him anywhere. I would go, I can't meet you there. I'm going to be him. I said, well, where are you having lunch? And I'd meet him, and I have his handwriting. He's writing like Husserl and Descartes, and he's writing all these things.
So this is right around the time the TOB Institute was being founded.
Exactly the time.
Yeah, that's what I'm
So
thinking.
I've got this training that's happening that's unlocking the TOB for me. Because now what I've read, I'm rereading and rereading, and now it's making more sense. And I'm understanding that his JP2's circular, that really confused me.
Yes, we always called it the spiral.
It is a spiral.
Deeper and
because he's using the same phrase, the same words, and you're like, all of a sudden, like 12 audiences later, he's using the same phrase, and you're like, we talked about. I was like, didn't we just talk about? Yeah. But he's taking you deeper with each one of these. So then I started to see the cone. I started to see that it looks like it's the same thing round and round. But actually, each time it's going deeper. There's a whole nother axis to this.
And that's what we've learned with what Louisville has needed, right? We knew that TOB was so vast, so deep, that if you go too quickly into spousal imagery, sexual ethics, all those
you
themes,
lose people.
Well, people get either shocked or frustrated or suspicious or whatever it is, depending on where they're coming from. And we knew that we needed to start early, basics. Yeah. Genesis, but not Genesis like TOB does in the intense way, but more like Adam and Eve and creation, and just focusing on that in a general sense, not the nakedness, not the vulnerability, not the intimacy, but more just like they were made. God made me and all that is, and starting there. Yeah. And then you can go deeper. And by the time you get into TOB in the fullness, after you've broken down the basics of Scripture, Genesis, Exodus, the infancy narratives, the Gospel of John.
Yes.
You're ready. And then you can go back to Genesis, but now you're on a totally different wavelength.
I agree with you.
Right? But if you're just taking it all at once, it's almost like, what? It's too much. But that spiral is the transformative element.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between learning theology of the body and teaching it, right? So the learning means that you need to get to that depth. You need to get to connection, the pieces. You need to see the 30,000-foot view of how things are connected with, the identity, relationship, mission. But then you need to be able to easily move into, the Song of Songs and how that fits into understanding the movement of human love and God's divine plan. So there's things that but the teaching part becomes dialogic. There's a dialogue that happens where we can't come in as presenters and saying, I'm giving you this and this only. It's like there's a dance where you give something, you see how that lands. and then you get something else to see how it lands, and then if something lights come on, you follow that vein, and let that be the place where they start to move into. Some people are ready for espousal imagery because there's a brokenness, either with their identity as a man or as a woman, or the meaning of the body and purpose. So you can begin there, but then you got to backtrack to get to, in the beginning it was not so, right?
Yeah.
So that ability to be agile, it means that you're very responsive and dialogic to the person in front of you, which obviously is harder the bigger the group, right? But when you're really a teacher, you're looking for those little clues to say, oh, there's a curiosity there. Because ultimately that curiosity is how they learn. It's not based on my curiosity.
Yeah.
They're going to get my energy because I'm really genuinely excited about the genre, about the subject. But moving from absorbing my energy and matching it to having your own is when you hit one of those subjects where they're like, I've been wondering about that. Never made sense to me before. So if that's true, then you're like, yeah, and watch this. And then you can, now they're
and that's
directed.
how people discover it on their own.
Yeah, and that's the only way they're going to do it.
Yeah.
So you do, you're doing, NFP, pre-Canis stuff, right? With small groups of people, yes?
Yeah. They're not small. Today I wouldn't call it small, but then I did. I did.
At one point.
Right.
And then, now, you're accustomed to speaking to huge rooms full of people. There's a, I don't know if I want to call it a tension, but there's this balance, and I've not yet quite figured out what that is. So maybe you can shed some light in that. On the one hand, right, we want to get TOB to, as many people as possible because this is such a transformative, beautiful teaching. On the other hand, we are not going to really get it, like we were just saying, without that like individual connection. Because if you have a room of 1,000 people where you're dealing with all sorts of different walks of life and all sorts of different perspectives, even a room of like 20 people versus a one-on-one conversation
Or small groups,
So
3 to 5, 8.
So like, what would, I don't really know exactly what I'm asking. I do this all
The
the time,
balance
but-
between the big top-down stuff, big talks, big
Yeah.
conferences, big retreats, versus the small, intimate, one-on-one, small group stuff. How do you balance it? How can you be both and? Because that's kind of what Family Renewal Project's trying to do.
Yeah.
Is that even possible? Is that wise?
Yeah.
Should you do that, or should you pick one?
There's and I know what you're getting at. I really do. Because this has been a dilemma for me from the beginning and trying to figure that out as well. 04, 05, 06, probably till about 2010. This was the Wild Wild West with TOB. There was all kind of people popping up, studies, backlash. It was wild. So we weren't that strategic about it, except Matt Pinto. Matt Pinto's always strategic, and his was like, these things need to be laid. These are the questions people are asking, so therefore these are the answers we're going to give. So there's a responsive piece that you don't give because you think it's interesting. You give because people, that's their entry point. So, and then finding a way to speak at that 10,000 foot view that gives people the field view, the general view. But the challenge of what do you teach in what environments, to whom, how wide, how deep, what particular areas, there should be diversity in that. And, we've had some vibrant conversations with some of the cowboys in the Wild Wild West as this was happening in a good way. I think it was healthy. Some of it was really tense, but it was healthy. And people have very different approaches based on how they were introduced to it. It's kind of like evangelization in general, right? If you came in through the intellectual circle, you're going to be very intellectual in the way you present the faith. You're going to talk about the difference between Aquinas and difference between, the subjective approach and the deductive approach, But if you came in because you had an affective experience at a charismatic renewal, then you're going to think that's the door. That's the door. So we end up being creatures of our own formation. So as a presenter, we have to be really reverent and attentive, but also recognize, as you said, basically that there's a foundation that needs to be laid to even know what questions to ask.
Yeah.
So the work you are doing with 7th grade, 8th grade, high school, is a privileged place where even with some of their brokenness, you're setting the frame. And my opinion is that the healthy thing is that you recognize that the work that you're doing, that I did in that area, is a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
No, I shouldn't say Band-Aid. That's too down. But it is it's temporary, because the right order for that is in the family. It's the normative lived family experience, which is your other hand in Family Renewal with the courses and the community, right? Where you're making it normative in the family, but in the meantime, because that's the fire, the smoke is what's happening in the schools, 13 to 22 leaving the faith. What is it, 20 some odd percent?
Yeah.
So that's the smoke, and we can't confuse that with the fire.
Mm-hmm.
We say this in Communio in my other work. The fire is what's happening in the decline and the breakdown of the family.
That's so important, because we'll see that, right? The smoke, as you call it, and we're trying to address that.
Yeah, people
right?
die from smoke inhalation,
and
so it's not wrong.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I think what it will lead to is an industrialization of evangelization, where it's like, well, we're gonna come up with this program, and we're gonna write this book, and then we're gonna make all the kids go through this, and we're just gonna boom, 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 right? Assembly line.
It's a fire drill.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so,
Which is why we try to slow it down to do 5th through 12th in a gradual process, so we don't feel like we're just pumping out 8th grade programs 4 days a week. But even that can become not enough.
Industrial.
And that's what I like, the balancing act in the classroom ministry and whatever, for me is, well, so we have surveys that we give the kids, and we track data, and I've been in charge of making the spreadsheet and so I'm and I'm all in that world. I get tunnel vision on that, and I love that stuff. But then there's also this, but that's not the thing. How many kids before and after believe that sex is acceptable before marriage? Okay, but that's not really the thing. Because when I'm in the classroom, and I've said this before, maybe on here, I don't know, but I found that it's so much more important that I just love the kid in front of me. Than that I make sure that they understood exactly what I said, or that you know what I'm saying.
Very much.
And that's and it's a difficult but I also have to deliver the thing that I'm supposed to deliver. So it's a little bit of a dilemma for me. And so I think that's kind of what I was getting at with my question, was you got however many people in front of you, every single one of them is this.
How do you love them in a way that makes it feel personal, even if they're in a big room?
Well, I think the answer that your question is part of my answer. And that's what I've settled on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great way to close us out here, is that, when I saw you in the classroom yesterday, my choleric side is going through all the content, right? My sanguine side is, man, look how connected he is with these kids. Because you won't get the same. This is why I have such a challenge with that age group. I don't get the affirmation that I need to move on. The signals are blinded to me. So with all the stuff that you were dealing with yesterday, even in that really good classroom, I mean, the kids were locked in, but it was a controlled chaos, right?
Yeah.
and I say that to say that my sanguine side it's that connection with those people, with those kids. It's the introduction of new vocabulary. It's the raised expectation of a man, 10 years their senior or longer, or whatever, older, that they can be received not as a teacher, but as a big brother. And all the stuff that's intangible, it's affective. I'm convinced in my older years here that has got more legs, more longevity than them being able to recite the formula of the family, or of the the definition of chastity. They're going to remember in that walking through that silly skit of dating, and it is silly, but they're going to remember that because those are real situations that they're going to be in. And now there's a vocabulary, there's an experience that is not theirs, but now becomes theirs. So you see how affected that's.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't.
It's not going to show up on the survey.
Yeah.
Right.
you're planting seeds for trees you'll never get shade under. And I mean this. And we got to believe that the right role of us in a classroom with these kids has its limits. And the limit there is the bounds of the primary education of the family.
Yeah.
So while you're doing this with the smoke to keep them from dying from inhalation, right? Smoke inhalation, there are others who are working on the building of the family, the confidence of stronger marriages that are built on the mutual gift of self, that of an aspiration of what marriage is that's different, that they're parenting to it. There's another group working on the parenting of how to communicate in a way that builds up and centers their masculinity, femininity, and the gift of self.
Yeah.
So you're not be all the end all. You got another group that's working on the feminine genius of the moms. You got another group working on the masculine genius of the men and living up that. This is a corporate effect. And even with Communio, my work with Communio, we're actually working with the parishes to make that a place of a relational hub where all these things come together in a really powerful way. Part of the problem in our work is that when you get into the vein of trying to help and to outcome, you see the whole field and it's scope creep. Scope creep is the Greek danger. Ask your boy Gary Burry about scope creep. When you start to see the field and you are the quarterback, you are the line judge, you are the linebacker, you can't be the safety. You can't be the tackle. And yet the game depends on everybody working together. So you have to be laser focused, but also recognize that the Holy Spirit as the coach, as the is putting together others that together has an impact that really becomes what's essential for God. So I just leave with an encouragement to say, you know, what I'm doing in this part of the vineyard, what you're doing in your part of the vineyard is essential but not sufficient. And it's okay.
That's beautiful.
It's okay. Stay encouraged, stay connected, keep an attentive eye for people who ought to be in the vineyard, but also recognize people whose work that you can't see is still, the coach got it. Yeah. The Holy Spirit, the coach has got it.
You know, I appreciate everything you said because you gave a great history of not just your own faith journey, but even your own connection to all these TLB
We never got to the Theology Body Institute, which is 10 years after that, right?
But what you gave is like the precursor to the whole history. Like, people need to know this history. It needs to be documented. It needs to be written down. There needs to be a book written. Somebody needs to write a book about how the TLB Institute, how the TLB groups were formed and started, a documentary, something.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
And maybe this is like a seed form of that desire that God's even put on my heart to do that. So I just thank you so much for that, because people need to know their history, and Louisville is one of those that needs to know.
Like, you guys got heat here,
yes.
And I know the heat goes both ways, but you're in a privileged place. So.
Yeah, so God bless you.
Thank you, brothers. God bless everything you do.
And thank you all for listening to this episode. We just ask you to pray for Damon as he departs on his flight here very shortly, and pray for his family, and pray for Family Renewal Project. And we will see you again on another episode of Spirit and Spire. God bless you.